All right, so get this. You guys wanted to know the secrets of attraction. Like all those little signs that someone might be, well, into you.
Hmm. Very interesting.
So we're going on a deep dive here. We're going to be looking at 20 signs from an expert's perspective, 20 key indicators someone might be attracted to you.
Wow, 20. That's a lot.
It is, right? But don't worry, this isn't about becoming a mind reader or anything.
Yeah, that would be a bit creepy.
Exactly. But who wouldn't want a little extra insight? I know I would.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's hard to tell.
So true. Okay, so let's get to it. What's the most fascinating thing about how we communicate attraction?
Well, I think it's amazing how much we actually communicate without even saying a word.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Attraction especially is full of these nonverbal cues.
So it's like a secret language we're all speaking.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, I'm ready to crack the code. So what kind of body language should we be paying attention to?
Well, let's start with something simple. Have you ever noticed how people tilt their heads?
A head tilt. Like when a dog hears a funny noise.
Well, kind of. It's more subtle than that, of course. But when someone is really captivated by what you're saying, they often tilt their head slightly.
Like they're really trying to listen.
Exactly, as if they want to fully absorb your words.
Okay, that makes sense. But is there a deeper meaning to it? I mean, beyond just being a good listener?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
From an evolutionary standpoint, the neck is a very vulnerable area.
Oh, right. It's like a sensitive spot.
Exactly. So by tilting their head, someone is subconsciously signaling trust and openness.
That's pretty interesting.
And, trust is a key ingredient in attraction.
So it's not just about hearing you better. It's about showing a little vulnerability.
You got it. Now, pair that head tilt with some steady eye contact, and things start to get really interesting.
Oh, eye contact. That's a big one.
For sure. Prolonged eye contact, especially when it feels comfortable and not creepy, can be a powerful indicator of interest.
Yeah, but isn't there a difference between, like, the intense stare of someone sizing you up and a softer, more engaged gaze?
Absolutely. It's all about the quality of the eye contact.
Yeah.
Genuine connection often involves those little eye darts.
Eye darts.
Yeah, when someone glances away for a moment, maybe with a slight blush, and then looks back at you.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. I always thought that meant they were losing interest.
Not at all. It's actually quite the opposite. Think of it as a way of managing the intensity of the connection.
Okay, so it's like they're testing the waters.
Precisely. It's a bit of a push and pull, which adds a layer of intrigue to the interaction.
So it's like a little game of, I'm interested, are you interested too?
Exactly. Now let's add another element into the mix. A genuine smile. You can tell the difference between a polite, social smile and one that truly reaches the eyes, right?
Yeah, I think so. A genuine smile is more about the whole face lighting up.
Exactly. It's not just the mouth curving upwards. There's often a crinkling at the corners of the eyes, and you might even notice a slight blush creeping up their cheeks.
Like they can't help but smile.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's that uncontrollable joy that's hard to fake.
Okay, but why are genuine smiles such a big deal when it comes to attraction?
Well, first of all, they activate specific facial muscles.
Really? Specific muscles just for smiling?
Yeah. And they're really difficult to control consciously. So a genuine smile is a pretty reliable indicator that someone is genuinely happy to be around you.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Plus, smiles trigger the release of endorphins.
Endorphins, aren't those like feel-good chemicals?
Yeah, exactly. Those feel-good chemicals make both the smiler and the receiver feel more connected.
So it's not just about looking happy, it's about literally creating a positive feeling between two people.
You got it.
That's amazing. Okay, what about those nervous habits some people have, like biting their lip or playing with their hair?
Right.
Are those signs of attraction too?
They can be, for sure. Think about it. When you're attracted to someone, it often comes with a surge of nervous energy.
Oh yeah, it's like you get butterflies in your stomach.
Exactly. And those little fidgets, like biting your lip or playing with your hair, they're a way of managing that excitement.
While still trying to stay composed.
Precisely.
So it's not necessarily about playing hard to get, but rather an authentic reaction to feeling flustered.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
They're trying to maintain their cool, but their body is subtly revealing their true feelings.
Wow, so even the things we try to hide can actually give us away.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered head tilts, eye contact, smiles, and nervous fidgets.
Right.
This is already giving me a lot to think about. But what about those really subtle cues? The ones that most people wouldn't even notice?
You're talking about things like blushing and blinking.
Blushing and blinking. Seriously.
Yeah, those are more involuntary reactions, you see.
Wait, you're telling me that even blushing and blinking can be signs of attraction?
It's true. You see, blushing is a physiological response to an adrenaline rush.
An adrenaline rush, like when you're on a roller coaster.
Yeah, kind of. When someone is attracted to you, their heart rate might increase, their blood vessels dilate, and bam, rosy cheeks.
Oh, so it's their body betraying their secret crush. That's kind of cute, actually. And what about blinking?
Well, that's a similar idea. Increased blinking can be a sign of heightened emotions.
Heightened emotions, like excitement.
Exactly. Excitement, nervousness, and yes, even attraction. And again, it's one of those subconscious reactions we have very little control over.
Wow, this is fascinating. It's like there's this whole secret language going on beneath the surface.
You got it.
And the more you understand this language, the more you can appreciate all the nuances of human interaction.
Absolutely.
But it's not about turning into a human lie detector or anything. We don't want to overanalyze every little gesture.
Right, that would be exhausting.
What about when someone starts, like, preening?
Preening.
Yeah, like adjusting their clothes or fixing their hair when you're around. Is that a sign they're trying to impress you, or are they just a bit vain?
I think it's definitely more about wanting to present their best self. When someone is attracted to you, they naturally want to look their best.
Makes sense. So they might smooth down their hair, adjust their clothes.
Exactly. Even subtly check their reflection, just to make sure they're putting their best foot forward.
So it's less about vanity and more about wanting to make a good impression.
That's right.
Okay, that makes sense. What about actually touching someone?
Touching.
Yeah, is that a sign of attraction, or is that getting a little too forward?
Well, touch can definitely be a powerful way to communicate attraction. But it's all about context and subtlety.
So, like, what kind of touch are we talking about here?
Well, it could be a light brush of the arm during a conversation, or a playful touch on the shoulder. Just little things.
Oh, okay. So it's not necessarily about grand romantic gestures, but more about those small moments of physical connection.
Exactly. They're testing the waters, seeing how you react, and signaling their own comfort level with you.
And the more comfortable they feel, the more those touches might increase.
That's possible, yes. But of course, it's essential to be mindful of personal boundaries and respect someone's signals if they seem uncomfortable.
Right. Consent and respect are always the most important things.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about individual signs, but is there a way to read body language as a whole?
As a whole.
Yeah, like are there certain postures or ways of positioning themselves that just scream, I'm interested?
Well, open body language is always a good indicator.
On body language.
Yeah. Think about it. When someone feels comfortable and engaged with you, they're more likely to have uncrossed arms, a relaxed posture, and to face you directly.
Like they're fully present in the moment.
Exactly.
And if they're leaning in during a conversation, that's probably a good sign too, right?
It could be, yes. It shows they're eager to hear what you have to say, and they feel comfortable being in close proximity.
Okay, so open body language, leaning in, that all makes sense. What about when someone makes a point of being near you, even when there are other options?
You're talking about proximity.
Proximity.
Yeah, we naturally gravitate towards people we're attracted to, even if it's on a subconscious level.
So if someone's always finding excuses to be near you, it might mean they're interested.
It's definitely a possibility.
This is so interesting. It's like I'm starting to see how much we can learn about someone just by paying attention to their body language.
It's amazing, isn't it?
All right, so let's talk about laughter. If someone laughs at all my jokes, does that automatically mean they're head over heels for me?
Not necessarily. But laughter, especially when it's genuine and flows naturally, can be a good sign.
So if they're genuinely amused and seem to be enjoying your company, it's a good indicator.
Right. It's about the quality of the laughter, not just the quantity.
Okay, that makes sense. What about fidgeting? Is that a sign of nervousness, boredom, or something else?
Fidgeting can be tricky because it can be caused by many emotions.
Like nervousness, excitement?
Yeah, or even just plain restlessness. But when it's combined with other signs of attraction, it can give us more information.
So a little fidgeting might just be their way of channeling nervous energy, but if they're squirming in their seat the whole time, maybe they're just uncomfortable.
That's a good way to think about it.
It seems like the key takeaway here is that it's about looking at the whole picture, not just one isolated sign.
Exactly. You have to piece together all those subtle cues, like a detective looking for clues.
So it's not about memorizing a checklist of behaviors, but rather about developing a sense of awareness.
Right. And remember, even with all this new knowledge, there's no foolproof formula for deciphering attraction.
People are complex. Sometimes their signals can be misleading.
Exactly.
So we should use these signs as a guide, but ultimately it's about trusting our instincts.
And having open communication.
That's great advice. I'd hate to misinterpret a friendly gesture as a love confession. So what other fascinating signs have we missed?
Well, there are a few more. Some might even surprise you.
Ooh, I love surprises. Tell me more.
Have you ever noticed how someone might, subtly arch their back when they're talking to you, especially women?
Arch their back.
Yeah, it's not about being overtly seductive or anything. It's more about subconsciously highlighting their physique.
So it's like a subtle way of drawing attention to their body.
It's often a subconscious behavior, but can definitely add to that overall impression of confidence and attractiveness. And speaking of subtle signals, let's talk about leg movement.
Leg movements, like crossing and uncrossing their legs.
Exactly. While some leg movements are purely for comfort, frequent shifting, especially when combined with other signs of attraction, can be a subtle form of flirting.
Oh, I see. So it's like a nonverbal way of saying, hey, look at me.
You got it. It's about drawing attention to their legs, creating a sense of movement and energy.
Okay, so we've got head tilts, eye contact, smiles, fidgeting, blushing, blinking, preening, touching, open body language, leaning in, proximity, laughter, arched backs, and leg movements.
That's quite a list.
I'm starting to feel like I need a scorecard to keep track of all these signs.
Don't worry, it becomes more intuitive with practice. The key is to just pay attention.
Okay, speaking of subtle shifts, are there any signs that are so subtle most people wouldn't even notice them?
Absolutely. Changes in breathing patterns are a big one.
Breathing patterns?
Yeah. When someone gets anxious or excited, their breathing might become quicker or shallower. It's a physiological response to adrenaline.
Wow, I never would have thought to pay attention to that.
And here's another one that most people miss. Flared nostrils.
Flared nostrils. Seriously?
I know, it sounds strange, but again, it's an involuntary reaction to heightened emotions. When adrenaline levels rise, it can cause the nostrils to flare slightly.
So if someone's nostrils are subtly flaring while they're talking to me, it could mean they're secretly attracted to me.
It's a possibility, especially if it's accompanied by those other signs we talked about.
Okay, I'm officially mind blown.
The power of nonverbal communication.
Exactly. But with so many signs to watch out for, it seems like it could get overwhelming. How do you know which ones to focus on?
That's where context comes in. You have to consider the situation, the person's personality, and just the overall vibe of the interaction.
So it's not about analyzing every little twitch and gesture, but rather looking for those meaningful patterns.
Exactly. Attraction is rarely communicated through one single action. It's a combination of many things.
It's like a symphony of behaviors that tells a story.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so it's about seeing the forest for the trees, not getting lost in the details.
Exactly. And while these signs can be really helpful, it's important to be realistic. Not every head tilt or every hair twirl is a surefire sign of romantic interest.
Right. People can be friendly and expressive without necessarily being attracted to us.
That's right.
So it's about being observant, but not jumping to conclusions.
Exactly.
That's good advice. I hate to misinterpret a friendly gesture as a love confession.
It happens. And remember, communication is a two-way street. While it's great to be able to read these signs, it's equally important to express your own interest.
So don't just sit there waiting for them to make all the moves.
Exactly. If you're interested in someone, show it. Make eye contact, smile, initiate conversations, see how they respond.
So it's all about that back and forth, that dance of attraction.
Precisely. And the more you understand those subtle signals, the more you can navigate that dance.
This has been so insightful. I feel like I've learned a whole new language.
I'm glad you think so. Now, are you ready for a rapid-fire recap of the 20 signs we've covered?
Wait, before we dive into that, I have a question.
Oh.
We've been talking about these signs in a general sense, but do they ever change? Like, depending on someone's cultural background?
Oh, absolutely. What might be considered flirty and playful in one culture could be seen as totally inappropriate in another.
Wow, so you could totally misinterpret a gesture based on your own cultural assumptions.
It happens all the time. For example, prolonged eye contact. In some cultures, that's seen as a sign of respect.
Right.
But in other cultures, it could be seen as aggressive or challenging.
Wow, that's a good point. I'd hate to accidentally offend someone by misreading their signals.
It's always a good idea to be mindful of the cultural context.
So cultural background matters. What else?
Well, even within the same culture, individual personalities play a huge role.
Oh, right. Some people are naturally more expressive than others.
Exactly. So what might be a clear sign of attraction from one person might just be normal behavior for another.
So there's no one-size-fits-all approach. It's about tuning into each individual person.
That's right.
This is making me rethink so many of my past interactions. It's like I'm suddenly aware of this whole other layer of communication.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Okay, I'm ready for that rapid-fire recap now. Hit me with all 20 signs.
Okay, deep breath. We've got head tilting, eye contact with those little eye darts, genuine smiling that reaches the eyes, subtle lip biting or playing with hair, blushing, increased blinking, preening, initiating light touches, arching their back, leaning in, proximity, open and relaxed body language, crossing and uncrossing legs, touching their neck or lips, putting extra effort into their appearance, changes in breathing patterns, flared nostrils, and of course, genuine laughter.
Whoa, that was a lot. I think I managed to catch most of them, but I'm definitely going to need to rewind and listen to that part again.
Don't worry, it's not about memorizing a list. Just pay attention to these cues in your everyday interactions.
So it's like learning a new language. The more you immerse yourself, the more fluent you become.
That's a great way to put it. And with practice, you'll start to see those subtle signs of attraction everywhere you look.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much.
It's a fascinating topic, isn't it?
Totally. I feel like a whole new world has opened up to me. It's like I'm suddenly aware of this whole other level of communication.
It really is amazing how much we communicate without even realizing it.
I know, right? But with all these positive signs to look out for, are there any, like, red flags? Things that might actually mean someone's not interested? Or worse, maybe even being disrespectful?
That's a really important point. You know, we've been talking about all those subtle hints of attraction.
Right.
Well, it's just as important to recognize those behaviors that might actually suggest a lack of interest or even signal some potential problems down the line.
Okay, so what should we be watching out for? What are some red flags?
Well, let's start with the opposite of open body language.
Oh, you mean like closed off?
Exactly. If someone's consistently closed off, arms crossed, body turned away, avoiding eye contact, it's a pretty clear sign they're not feeling engaged.
Makes sense. It's like they're putting up a wall.
Right. Like, back off, I'm not interested. And while some people might just be shy or reserved, consistently closed-off body language, especially when it's combined with other negative cues, is definitely a red flag.
Okay, so closed-off body language, not good. What else?
Dismissive or disrespectful behavior is another big one.
Like what kinds of things?
Interrupting constantly, belittling your opinions, making jokes at your expense, things like that.
Yeah.
Basically anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, or undermines your self-worth.
It's like they're not valuing you as a person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Attraction should be built on mutual respect, not on one person trying to assert dominance or control over the other.
So if someone's making you feel bad about yourself, even if they seem charming on the surface,
Time to walk away.
don't ignore those gut feelings.
That's right. If something feels off, it probably is. Trust your instincts.
Okay, so red flags, closed-off body language, disrespectful behavior. What about mixed signals? Like, sometimes someone seems totally into you, and then other times it's like you don't even exist. How do you navigate that?
Mixed signals can be so frustrating, can't they?
The worst.
I think the most important thing is to remember that you deserve clear and consistent communication. If someone's constantly hot and cold, it might be a sign that they're not sure what they want or that they're not ready for a committed relationship.
Or maybe they're just playing games.
That's always a possibility too. And if that's the case, it's probably best to move on.
Right. You don't need that kind of drama in your life.
Exactly. Focus on finding someone who is genuinely interested in you and who is willing to put in the effort to communicate clearly and honestly.
Okay, so clear communication is key. Are there any other red flags when it comes to communication? Like, what about someone who never seems to ask you any questions about yourself?
Oh, that's a great point. When someone is genuinely interested in you, they're curious about your thoughts, feelings, experiences.
They want to get to know you on a deeper level.
Exactly. If someone is constantly talking about themselves and never seems to show any interest in your life, it's definitely a red flag.
Like they're more interested in themselves than in you.
It can feel that way, for sure. And it's not a good foundation for a healthy, balanced relationship.
So pay attention to those conversations. Make sure it's a two-way street.
That's such great advice.
Okay, so we've talked about closed-off body language, disrespectful behavior, mixed signals, and one-sided conversations. Are there any other red flags we should be aware of?
I think it's also important to be mindful of those who are overly possessive or controlling. The early stages of attraction, a little jealousy can be flattering, but when someone tries to isolate you from your friends and family or constantly questions your whereabouts, it's a huge red flag.
It's like they're trying to control you instead of respecting your independence.
Exactly. Healthy relationships are built on trust and mutual respect, not on control and manipulation.
So if someone starts showing those possessive tendencies early on, it's probably a sign to run in the opposite direction.
It's definitely a sign to proceed with caution.
This has been so eye-opening. I'm starting to see how important it is to pay attention not just to the positive signals, but also to those potential red flags.
You're absolutely right. It's all about being mindful and recognizing those warning signs.
So in a nutshell, open communication, respect for boundaries, and trusting our instincts are all key ingredients in navigating the sometimes confusing world of attraction.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from those subtle signs of attraction to the red flags that might signal trouble. But before we wrap things up, I'm curious. We've talked about how culture and individual personalities can influence how people express attraction.
Right.
But what about gender? Are there any significant differences between how men and women tend to communicate their interest?
That's a really fascinating question. It's a topic that researchers have been studying for years.
So what have they found? Are there any clear patterns?
Well, it's important to remember that every individual is different.
Right, we can't make sweeping generalizations.
Exactly. But there are some interesting trends that have emerged from these studies. For instance, women tend to be more expressive with their nonverbal cues than men.
So women are better at sending and receiving those subtle signals.
They're definitely more attuned to social cues and emotional nuances.
It's like they have a built-in radar for picking up on those unspoken messages.
That's a great way to put it. And that might be why they're often better at interpreting those subtle signs of interest.
So what about men? How do they typically express their attraction?
Men tend to be more direct.
More straightforward.
Right. They might rely more on those overt gestures, like initiating physical contact, making bold statements.
So while women might drop hints and send mixed signals, men are more likely to just come right out and say what they're feeling.
That's a good way to summarize it, yes.
It's like they're speaking different languages.
It could definitely feel that way sometimes. But again, these are just general tendencies, not hard and fast rules. Everyone communicates their attraction in their own way.
So there's no one-size-fits-all approach. It's about understanding each person's unique communication style.
Exactly.
This is making me see everything in a whole new light.
The power of nonverbal communication.
Exactly. So it's not just about reading body language, it's also about being able to express our own feelings clearly.
Absolutely. Attraction is a two-way street, remember. It's about being both a good sender and receiver of those signals.
I love that, a two-way street. So what's the most important thing for our listeners to remember after all this talk about attraction and red flags and communication styles? What's the key takeaway from this deep dive?
That's a great question. I think the most important thing to remember is that understanding these signs is just one part of the equation. It's helpful to be aware of those subtle cues, of course, but we don't want to overanalyze every interaction.
So it's not about becoming an expert body language analyst.
Right. It's more about using this knowledge to enhance our understanding of human connection.
At the end of the day, it's all about building genuine relationships.
Exactly. Relationships built on trust, respect, and that desire to connect on a deeper level.
So be ourselves, be respectful, and trust our instincts.
You got it. And never underestimate the power of a genuine smile.
Or a warm gaze.
And the courage to be open and vulnerable.
This conversation has been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your insights.
It's been my pleasure.
Well, on that note, I think it's time for us to start wrapping things up.
Okay.
But before we go, I want to encourage everyone listening to share their own experiences and observations. Have you noticed any of these signs in your own interactions? What subtle cues have you picked up on? We'd love to hear from you.
Let's keep this conversation going. After all, the more we understand about human connection, the richer our lives become.
So much to think about, right? But okay, let's say you've noticed some of these signs, some of these sparks. How do you know if it's, the real deal, if it could actually grow into something more?
Well, there's no guaranteed formula.
Oh, of course not. But there's got to be some clues, right?
Of course. One thing to look for is consistency. Are those positive signs happening regularly, or was it just a one-time thing?
Okay, so if someone's only flirty once in a blue moon, maybe it doesn't mean much.
Right. But if they're consistently showing interest through their words and actions, well, that's a much better sign.
So consistency is key. What else?
Reciprocity. Are you feeling those sparks too?
Oh, right. It's a two-way street.
Exactly. Attraction is a dance, remember? Both people need to be engaged.
So pay attention to your own gut feelings. If you're not feeling it, it doesn't matter how many signs they're giving off.
Absolutely. And as that connection deepens, you'll probably start to notice those nonverbal cues evolving.
Evolving? How do you mean?
Well, think about it. A touch on the arm from someone you just met might be exciting, but a hug from someone you've really connected with can feel totally different.
Oh yeah, much deeper, more meaningful.
Exactly. And as you get to know each other better, you start developing your own unique language almost.
Your own special way of communicating.
Right. Inside jokes, knowing glances, little gestures that only you two understand.
Yeah, that's so sweet. Like a secret code.
Exactly. And those little moments, those unspoken connections, that's what makes a relationship really special.
This has been so insightful, honestly. I feel like I've learned so much about the dance of attraction, about those subtle cues and signals.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Totally. But remember, everyone, these are just tools. They're not a guarantee.
Right, don't overthink it. Just be yourself, be respectful, and enjoy the journey.
Beautifully said. So what's the most important thing for our listeners to remember about all this?
Well, I think it's about more than just decoding signals, you know?
It's about connecting with other people.
Exactly. Building genuine relationships based on mutual respect and trust and all that good stuff.
So be open, be honest, be kind.
And don't be afraid to show your true self. That's what really attracts people in the end.
Such great advice. Well, on that note, it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive into the fascinating world of attraction.
It's been a pleasure.
And as always, we want to hear from you. Have you noticed any of these signs in your own life? What subtle cues have you picked up on?
Share your stories, your observations. We're all in this together.
And until next time, keep those eyes open, those hearts open. You never know what might happen.
Happy connecting, everyone.